Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, where leading experts, innovators, and policymakers explore the latest developments shaping the future of nuclear energy.
Our guest spent the early part of his career helping a nuclear plant shut its doors for good. Today, he's helping bring one back. And in between, the whole American conversation about nuclear energy changed, with him watching from the front row. Pat O'Brien on what it takes to earn a community's trust. Stay with us on Advanced Nuclear.
Thanks to our sponsors of Advanced Nuclear, whose support helps make cybernetic intelligence, sovereign compute, uncompromised security, and resilient power built end to end.
Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, the United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power. I am your host, Dominique Cooper. Here's something most people probably don't realize. When a nuclear power plant closes, that's almost always the end of the story. The plant, it gets taken apart and it never comes back. Well, until now. In Michigan, a plant called Palisades is being brought back to life. Our guest today has helped tell that story to the public from the very beginning. Pat O'Brien is the Director of Government Affairs and Communications at Holtec International, the company behind the Palisades restart and a new generation of small modular reactors. He has seen this industry from both sides, and he works in a part of the nuclear world we don't really talk about enough. Humble opinion. Not the engineering, the trust. How you talk with the community, how a town's confidence is earned, how public support is actually won. Views expressed by our guest are his own and do not represent those of UCAN Power or its member organizations. Pat, I am excited to chat with you. Welcome to Advanced Nuclear.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to this.
Oh, it's going to be fun. And I say that every episode because I'm like manifesting it in advance. It's going to be fun.
Excellent.
All right, so let's hop into it.
Sure.
As I've said in the intro, you had a front row seat to a remarkable turn in this industry. You started out helping a nuclear plant, Pilgrim, if I got that right, shut down and close. And now you're helping bring one back to life. Could you walk us through that journey and what that shift has felt like in your shoes?
Sure. I actually joked that I felt like for the longest time the Grim Reaper in the industry, because if I was showing up at your plant, it was probably not a good sign. I started a Pilgrim when it was an operating plant, and when I actually started, they hadn't announced shutdown yet. It was only 4 months after I got to the plant that they went, okay, now we're going to shut this plant down. And I went, well, there goes my whole career in nuclear. It's about 4 months long, and I'll figure out what's next. But happy to say that here I am a decade later, or actually 12 years later, still talking about nuclear, and there has been that huge sea change. Unfortunately, between Pilgrim, Vermont Yankee, Indian Point, Oyster Creek, plants that I had, and then ultimately Palisades, plants that I had kind of been involved in when I previously worked for Entergy. We really saw a time where nuclear wasn't valued. Gas prices were really low. And, in the non-regulated market, the easiest decision to make was to retire these assets. So that's where we were headed. And I jokingly say I ended up at Holtec because when they bought Pilgrim for decommissioning, they bought me with the furniture, and they've just kind of figured out what to do with me since then. So I've helped to do that, kind of shutdown story, which, growing up in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where Pilgrim is, it's my hometown. I grew up with a nuclear plant. I understood it. I worked in state and local government prior, so I had that interaction with both the plant from the other side, but then actually with the community from this side. And really there's always a story to tell. So for us, telling that story, whether it's decommissioning or a restart, is really key to gain that public trust. And I think, the path to how we got there was a little bit slow, but, I'm happy to say what we're doing at Palisades is historic. And I look forward to actually, completing that story this year and restarting the plant.
So when people picture a nuclear company, they think, engineers, reactors, rightfully so. What is your job, government affairs and comms, actually involve, and why does it matter as much as the engineering?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It is funny. It's an industry where, when when I started and I said, hey, I work in energy because nuclear wasn't cool. But now when you say nuclear, everyone's really interested.
It's cool now.
And that's one of the things where everyone's like, how do I get into the industry? Do I have to be a nuclear engineer? And, that's one of those things where I keep telling people it's not a requirement. I said, you can go, I jokingly say from GED to PhD, there's a job in the industry for you if you want to look. And, the industry's done a better job of trying to recruit because we understand that if you're actually going to expand the nuclear industry the way it's projected to over the next 30 to 40 years, there's something like 350,000 people you have to get into the workforce. So there's a significant growth opportunity. So it's not just engineers. It's people like me that have to help tell that story. And really my role is, I'll say it's always kind of almost always evolving. When I started, I was really just a site communicator. So I was the one that would do all the internal communications to the 600 employees to make sure that we were aligned on safety, we were aligned on goals, and what we were doing as a plant itself to operate properly but maintain safety and keep a focus on people. And then it morphed when we shut down into decommissioning, where I took over the government affairs role, which is something I had in my background anyway. So to be able to put those two together, where okay, now I'm the one doing the community engagement, I'm the one that's doing the lobbying on potential bills that may be harmful to our business operations or helpful. Either way, go and support or oppose where needed. And then on top of that, I've kind of taken over all the media relations. So I'm the one that has to explain to the media what's going on. And when I worked at Pilgrim, we weren't the best run plant, and we had a lot of operational issues. So I spent a lot of time talking to the likes of the Boston Globe and, a lot of the Boston media, and then with Indian Point, a lot of the New York media around our decommissioning. So yeah, helping people understand what I would say is a pretty complex issue in very simplified terms. So one of the best things I think I did when it speaks to that term of engineering roles, I actually had an engineer and a former training manager challenge me and said, hey, listen, if you're going to be the communicator for this site, I want you to take the systems class that all the operators have to take. It's a 2-week class, and you understand all aspects of the plant. And if you do that, I want you to pass the test. And I went, okay, I haven't taken a test since my grad school. I don't know if this is really what I'm looking forward to, but I went and did it. I would say it's the best thing I did, because then I understood, really the plant from both sides of the nuclear side, the non-nuclear side. It helped me be a better storyteller in the industry. So really that's my role, is, still doing all the internal communications for the company and a lot of these decommissioning sites, but helping the media understand what's going on at either our decommissioning sites, our recommissioning site, or even just on spent fuel, which is what our company started as, is kind of the worldwide leader in spent fuel storage management. So I kind of have to know a lot about a lot and try to make it very simple to communicate, whether it's the public, the media, or, elected officials.
Look, I can totally relate with the phrase that you mentioned. I have to know a lot about a lot, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around the lot,
Yeah. 100%.
So let's talk about the Palisades restart. Some are saying this is historic, beyond explanation, but I want to give you the opportunity to really explain what's going on and where does it stand today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's amazing where we've come. I still remember, when that plant was shutting down and transitioning from energy to Holtec, someone came to me and said, hey, listen, the governor would love to see this plant stay open. They understand it's not possible. Is there something you guys would consider restarting? And being a privately held company with, I would say, a different risk profile, we kind of looked at that as a challenge. And I still remember one of our executives coming and said, hey, I gave this a 3% chance. We want to really look at this. It's never been done before. We gotta figure out a way to do it, but it's highly unlikely. And, as we started to kind of look into, okay, what's the regulatory path to get that done? And what's the maintenance? And what's the big project picture? And it started moving from 3 to 5 to 10 to 30 to 50. And it's like, oh man, we're really going to do this. And it was awesome because, like I said before, I felt like so much of a Grim Reaper at plants, shutting them down. I really wanted to kind of be here in this industry when the tide turned, because you could see it coming at some point, which thankfully it happened when only a few plants kind of shut down in that time range. So for us, Palisades has really been what I'll say a long-term maintenance outage to get it, basically back to a position where we can restart it. We were the first plant to go from a technical decommissioning status under the NRC's regulatory authority back to an operational status. That occurred last fall. But what we were able to do, I would say what most plants aren't, is long-term maintenance that wouldn't be available to an operating plant. When traditionally you have an operating plant, you have a refueling outage, it's, roughly 30 days. So you have a lot of maintenance work in a short period of time. We were able to take large components off site, have them rehabbed, refurbed for up to a year. Some of them went from Michigan to North Carolina to, the original manufacturer's stuff to get work done. So really providing, a level of maintenance and rehab to a plant that will provide long-term benefits that normally you wouldn't be able to do. So we were able to do a lot of that. A lot of the, kind of the simple maintenance tasks are still what's kind of left to remain. The major projects have all been accomplished. So we're getting into that real kind of, near term where the plant should be coming back online here in 2026. And again, it'll be awesome because it is historic, but actually what I take more pride in is we kind of started a trend. I mean, with Chris Crane Energy Center and then Dwayne Arnold now announcing it. So it's like, it's not just us. We've shown that there is an ability to do this. There's a logical pathway. I will say we wouldn't have got it done without the 600 men and women that work there now permanently again, the additional over 1,000 craft members that we had on site as part of this project. Really, the pride that they have in the plant, the pride in having this project on their resume and making sure that we can get this done safely and on time has been huge.
Look, I mean, Pat, what I'm learning is that really what you are, metaphorically speaking, is, a therapist, right? Like, so you specialize in, knowing how to put these things being nuclear power plants, to bed, to say, hey, just take a little nap and I'll come revisit you. I don't know. I can't tell you if it's going to be 3 years or 5 or 10, but I'm hopeful that maybe, just maybe, I'll come revisit you. And I mean, look what you guys are doing today. So, you're just a really good, successful therapist that's extremely experienced at resurrecting power plants.
Being married to a therapist, my wife would probably like that analogy.
See, it all comes together, So let's talk community. When a community has questions or concerns, what has actually worked for you? And could you share just a framework, if you can, on, what good communication looks like when you're sharing something as big as nuclear energy and the resurgence of it?
Sure. I think the key part is having the right voices that can explain it, in simple terms. I've seen that go both ways at different plants. When I started in nuclear, the Northeast is a much more, I'll say, adversarial area when it comes to nuclear power. So, try to be as transparent as possible, understanding that there are some things you can't say. It's not out of an effect of trying to hide anything. It's just there is some things that are critical to safety and security that just can't be shared. So as long as you try to do it in the best way possible, transparency-wise. What I will say about Michigan, and I joke about this all the time, having done a lot of work in Massachusetts and New York prior to kind of starting to go out in that direction for the Palisades restart, was I had never been thanked for coming to a meeting until I actually went to a meeting out in Michigan where they were like, "Oh, we're happy you're here," and I was kind of waiting for the but and I was waiting for the bad side of that to come, and it just never kind of came. I guess it's the Midwest nice, which I really enjoyed. But for us, I mean, it was really just being open and saying, "Hey, listen, this is what." The governor's kind of asked us to do. We're looking at it as a possibility. The community, there's a couple of things I think out there that made sense, which, the area out there really didn't want to see the plant shut to begin with. The jobs and revenue provided to the community. I mean, your average pay out there, I think, is about $118,000 per position. And you had, I think when they did the University of Michigan did an economic impact study for what the plant provided in economic impact annually, it was something to the tune of $170 million a year. So for the Michigan side of it, the governor, it made a very easy case for the governor to say, we'll help provide a $300 million grant if that helps get you guys going in that direction. And then we were able to secure $1.5 billion loan from DOE, and we put up our required percentage of that, which I think is 20%, to be able to kind of do this restart as a whole project. But really, it took the community saying, yes, we want it, we want to see it, we want the jobs back. You really saw the local officials throughout the counties, throughout the local communities. You saw the business leaders all kind of get involved. And a lot of that was just on the ground, meeting to meeting work, having those conversations, answering the questions. Really, it all starts with safety. So is it safe to do this? Yes. Okay. And here's why. And, you hear in this industry, and I've heard it for years, is all these plants, they're too old. It's too old. And I laugh. And I equate it to someone that owns like a 67 Mustang. Okay, it looks like a 67 Mustang on the outside, but if you've replaced all the parts and pieces inside it over the last 50 years, it's not a 67 Mustang. And that's the reality of how nuclear is. I mean, the amount of maintenance and work that goes into these plants, every other year, usually 18 months, 24 months, depending on the maintenance cycle for outages. It's just significant inputs that have basically made these plants new on the inside.
It's funny that you make that analogy, because the thing that came to mind is, and this is not going to be the best example, but you think about like how homes are being built so quickly, whereas homes that were built in the 1980s, yeah, they may have some, just structural things that you may have to correct, but it does not. When I say it does not compare to some of the structural issues that new homeowners are dealing with these houses like popping up out of nowhere every couple of weeks, right? So it may not, it may look good on the outside, but what does that inside look like? And the same thing, vice versa. It may not necessarily look like the newest, thing on the block, but let's talk about what the insides are, right? And that could definitely help with the safety talk. So I want to talk about Pioneer 1 and 2.
Sure.
Right. So for a community that's about to host 2 new reactors, how is that conversation different from the restart conversation? Are there some commonalities that you can kind of leverage in your comms? Like, could you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's, part of the reason I'll say that we selected that site for the first SMRs of our design was because of the support we had from the community. The area understands nuclear. And I think, anyone who's a developer for new nuclear, I think that's pretty much the easiest path, is to go to someplace and look to locate where there's a history with nuclear. Because, growing up in a community with nuclear, you understand the risks, you understand the benefits. You kind of have that knowledge base, you have that workforce already kind of established. So for us, it made a lot of sense. There was that push. And then Michigan, on the other side, Michigan really wants that clean baseload power for their grid. And for us, it was, okay, we've had this reactor design for about 15 years. And really, our reactor design it's not exotic. It's, a pressurized water reactor. It's called 3Gen Plus technology that's really simplified, 9 safety systems. You don't need operator interactions to keep the plant in a safe condition for long term. So, we have kind of that known tech. It's kind of what we see as an easier path to commercialization. So, it's not like I'm trying to explain molten salt or, liquid metals to people. It's very, kind of easily translatable. So where we had heard from the industry as a whole, the utilities, where we love your design because we understand it. We would love to buy the 4th, 5th, 6th one you build. We don't want to do first of a kind risk, first of a kind costs, which, that's the challenge right now in the industry as a whole, is how do you build at scale so that you get the economies of scale for pricing. You look at the Vogtle plants, the only 2 kind of advanced reactors that have been built in the last, 30 something years. While they had their challenges, and I think there's a number of reasons why they had the cost challenges they did. If you actually just look at the raw data, where from Vogtle 3 to Vogtle 4, they were able to reduce cost and time to key milestones by like 30%. The sin that we had was that there wasn't, another plant to go have that workforce that had clearly shown, as you lock down the design and as you lock down a workforce and have them understand how to build these at scale, that we didn't have someplace else for them to go to continue, because you would have continued to see, reductions in cost, reductions in time. And that's really our goal with our Pioneer 1 and 2 is, okay, proof concept, have the industry come, see, touch, feel, understand what these look like, know the first of a kind cost, but then also know what you can drive those down to if you build an order book. And for us, Pioneer 1 and 2 is the goal. We would project then to build 4 SMRs at our Oyster Creek site in New Jersey. New Jersey just passed or just repealed the moratorium on new nuclear. They're getting very aggressive on finding some pathways to incentivize new nuclear build. I actually just got appointed to the New Jersey Nuclear Task Force by the governor so that I can kind of have those conversations with key stakeholders. So there's a lot of movement around the country where, okay, how do we build that order book so that this isn't, kind of the same problems we've had in the past. You build 1 or 2, or then you start customizing. The minute you start going down that path, that becomes the challenge. And obviously, you build a reactor, you're going to have some site specifics depending on what the sites are themselves. But the right for us as a developer is we want that power block, we want that control room, we want those reactors and turbine halls to look the same, whether they're in Michigan, New Jersey, Massachusetts, pick a state. We want them to all look the same so that you can kind of help the industry in 2 ways, which is 1, cost control, and then 2, ultimately what you'd like to be able to do is just license a reactor operator on a design so that it's not specific to, the challenge of, okay, I have 2 exact reactors on the same site. You can work on this one, but you can't work on this one. If we're going to face those workforce challenges, that's how we're going to have to look at things.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about that probably a month ago from a workforce development perspective. And you've touched on that because I was going to ask, what does that mean for the workforce development piece? How many jobs are we talking? Could you just kind of expand on what that will look like for a listener that may be considering a career pivot, or, they're like, what, I think I want to, really follow through on the trades side of things, and nuclear energy sounds very interesting. There's a lot happening there. What would you say?
Yeah, no, it's a good kind of discussion. I love talking workforce. So for me, our design, we anticipate for a dual unit. So that'd be 2 320 megawatt reactors, 340 megawatt reactors. Sorry. We anticipate about 270 as the full complement for that, which, having worked at a plant that was 680 megawatts, so I'm doing the math at 680 to 680, it's about we were about 600. So it's about half the size. Part of that has to do with how you're going to lay it out with security, with kind of the systems built in. You'll be able to kind of use those economies of scale. So for us, there's still significant amount of jobs tied to this. Again, like we talked a little bit before, I think anyone that wants to get in the industry, there's going to be a role for you, and there'll be a good paying role for you. So the trades are going to be huge, not from just the construction perspective, but from the operational perspective as well. There's always, a number of craft labor that is on these sites. I think with our restart project, I think we had 15 different labor unions signed up for that job, plus the 2 local unions. So it's like 17 different unions on the job. So craft labor is huge there. And then, if you want to be an operator, it's kind of one of those things where everyone thinks if you're a nuclear operator, it goes back to our point, you have to be a nuclear engineer. And it's it's not the case. You can have a high school degree and be a nuclear operator. You just have to be able to have the proficiency, the math skills, the ability to pass the training, which those training it's significant. It's an almost 2-year program to become a licensed operator. It's a big commitment. And I know a number of them, and they're, the training that they go through to get their license, and then the training that they go through to maintain their license is like no other industry. When you're talking about an industry that every 6th week you're in training for a week, you go through the simulations, you go through the process, and if you don't pass, you're not on shift. It's a serious level of training and development. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities. The other one, I think it's more national in a lot of ways, because I see this at the decommissioning sites, which health physicists, like the RP, radiation protection group, those are jobs that, you can train up and learn for pretty quickly. But those are ones that I think are in dire need across the industry as the industry ages. Coming from the decommissioning side, when we shut down, Pilgrim or Indian Point, at the time, I think it was like 55% of the workforce that was there that day were already retirement eligible. A lot of them stayed to make sure through the end. So you were already facing as an industry kind of a challenge of staffing that workforce just for continued operations, never mind what you're going to need to staff for the next generation of nuclear.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I was thinking, oh my gosh, you could with what you guys are doing, you could have a cadre of like reactor operators that are ready, that are trained, they go through the training program. And I know quite a few people that have gone through reactor operator training, and let's just say some of them no longer have hair, and they've aged tremendously because it is a pretty robust program, which makes me think that that could be, you know, like an episode topic, like talking to someone who has gone through the program and is currently a reactor operator, because I think educating the public on just how robust the training system,
Mhm.
it like how robust the training system is within the nuclear energy space, I think could potentially alleviate some of those concerns about, like, is it safe? You know, people know what they're doing. Yes, of course they do. Okay, I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but
No, no,
yeah.
I totally agree with you. Like, I'll go there because actually, I think one of the coolest things we did, and I led it when we were shutting the plants down, was we actually did full on control room simulations where I brought in all the media to show them like what's the interaction in the control room for this process. And what I think the media walked away the most with was like the three-part communication, the adherence to processes and procedures. Like they were like, whoa. And it's like, yeah, it's not normal like business operate. It's very formalized, very focused, and you're not touching anything unless someone has agreed with you and gone through that process of communicating with you. So I'm with you 100%. I think a lot of that, if you could open that up, and what we did was we allowed them to speak to, you know, the crew that was going to shut it down, but then we also had a retiree, someone that was staying with the company moving south, and then someone that was staying for decommissioning, and gave all their perspectives. So there's a lot of stories to tell, and you got a lot of good storytellers in the industry.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I definitely would love to get connected just to tell some of the stories. I mean, the things that you learn as a reactor operator. I'm obviously I'm not experienced there, but just through some of the people that I know that have gone through the training, what they teach you, because it's so rigid, it's so formalized, those things just innately transfer into your everyday life. So you
Mhm.
start engaging with things outside of work in your life with that same level of formality. So yeah, I definitely want to pull that thread in the near future. So Pat, have you heard of a lightning round?
I have.
All right. So are you ready to transition into a lightning round? I have
Absolutely.
about 4 to 6 questions.
Okay.
All right. So, 60 seconds to answer a question. I would say don't think about it, but,
Yeah.
do your best. All right. So, first question. What's one thing about nuclear energy you wish every community member knew?
I wish they understood the safety in the process that we were just talking about. How much training goes into, how much commitment goes into developing a workforce that can react to anything and is ready for anything. When the reality is, most of the day is pretty boring. I look at those guys that sit in the control room for 30 years, and they're like, the best day is when nothing happens, and we sit there
When
for 12
nothing
hours.
happens.
Yep, exactly. Boring and
That's what you
predictable.
want.
Boring and predictable is what we want.
Exactly, exactly. Question number two. The most rewarding moment of the Palisades restart so far.
Ooh, so far I was gonna go with the easy one, which is when we turn it back on. So far, to me, it's actually been seeing the. So I think there's about 125 people that actually came back to the plant, whether they had been retirees or had stayed with Entergy, gone south, and then made the decision to move back to the area and help with that restart. Because to me, those are the people that we couldn't have done it without. A lot of them had, I forget what it was. I think when we reconstituted the training program department, it was like 200 years worth of reactor operator experience. So those people wanted to come, and what they said to us was, "I'll give you 2 3 years. I'm going back to retirement. I don't need this check. I don't need to be doing this." But I want to pass on my knowledge that next generation is going to run this plant for the next 30 years. So to me, that's the coolest part from like a human perspective.
Oh yeah. So I was chatting with another individual on another episode, and one of the things that I quickly realized is the common thread, regardless of who you're talking to, what company you're talking to. There's a common thread about like investing in the future. And so the community, generally speaking, is very welcoming, but they have like this altruistic part of themselves that they're willing to give back to the industry, even if they're retired. So That's to me, that's amazing. It's wonderful. You don't quite see that often in other industries. All right, third question. A myth about nuclear that you watched fade the fastest.
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you're starting to see people understand that radiation isn't that scary. We have radiation in our everyday lives, and it drives me nuts that people are like, any radiation's bad. I'm like, just living on Earth, you get radiation every day. Your cell phones, your microwaves. I mean, your granite counter. I mean, I still remember a story where someone was at a public meeting. Someone brought up the point that your granite countertops, because they're granite, are radioactive. And a woman looked to her husband and said, I want to rip out our countertops now. I didn't know it was radioactive. And it's like, if that's the last thing, if you're worried about that, you got a lot bigger problems. So to me, you're starting to see that understanding. I guess the other thing I'll say too, and this is, I think really why you're seeing an interesting, I'll say, dynamic on the left-leaning, like, environmentalist side, where I think there's still a bit of a rub going on where, you have the older generation that's been generally anti-nuclear for 30, 40, 50 years. And they're kind of clashing with a lot of the younger, kind of more environmental left-leaning, because that generation looks at it and says, we think climate change is a bigger issue. We understand that you can safely store fuel, which you guys have been doing for 60, 70 years. So there's that interesting dynamic too of, like, waste has been created to be this big issue. And I keep saying it's only waste if we waste it. There's a ton of potential energy there. You just got to make a political decision. It's not a scientific issue at this point.
Oh, what a hot take. It's only a waste if you waste it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right, next question. The best piece of communications advice you would give to someone new in the industry?
I have an opportunity to do this quite often because I end up speaking at the Nuclear Energy Institute's communications forum. My biggest thing is get educated best you can. Like when I talked about before, taking that systems class and understanding your plant, knowing the industry and knowing what you're actually talking about is huge. And then the other piece I would say is never panic. I've had some interesting incidents in my career, and I'll give you this one really quick if I can, but it'll
absolutely.
It'll give you a good reference. So when I was at Pilgrim, we were in column 4, worst run plant in the country per NRC guidelines. We had a 20-person NRC inspection team come to the site for a 2-week inspection. Day one of that inspection, the team leader of the NRC was sending 20 pages of raw inspection notes back to the region, to NRC Region 1, just to kind of say, hey, here's our initial thoughts on day one. And what usually happens is over the course of 2 weeks, they dig into kind of those initial thoughts, and a lot of those go away. Someone mistakenly in an email, instead of sending it to the public information officer at Region 1, they sent it to the largest anti-nuclear group in the region. The Boston Globe had it 5 minutes later, all raw inspection notes, day one, which didn't paint the best picture because it's just initial belief. I went up to my site vice president's office. He said, hey, by the way, this is what happened. The Globe has it. And basically was like, good luck. You get to deal with the media. And I went, okay. And it was one of those, like, we'll get through this. We'll figure it out. And it was a process. I actually felt worse for the NRC inspector. He was like almost physically ill from what had happened. And I just said, hey, listen, mistakes happen. We'll get through it. And just trying to be calm in a situation where I think everyone else is kind of panicking. That's the best advice I can give you. Just try to maintain that sense of calm, regardless of how you feel inside. Because I remember being inside going, oh, God, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think most people can relate at some level in their lives where it's like, you know what, I'm just going to see if I could find the peace in the situation and kind of live in that, because I really don't know what I'm doing, but we're going to get it done. We'll figure it out.
You can't get to the end without taking little steps. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay, last question. For the lightning round. One thing a listener could do to help their own community have a better conversation about nuclear.
Ooh, I think educate yourself. There's a lot of good, if you're really interested in nuclear, there's a lot of good nonprofits out there that kind of can provide some training. One I'm familiar with just because I'm a board member of, Generation Atomic. They actually offer something called Nuclear Ambassador, where you can actually go and it's your kind of own pace. You can learn about nuclear power, and it's a very simple kind of training that then gives you that ability, I think, to educate yourself. And if you want to be an advocate, it helps, kind of just you be more educated and talk about it in your community. And I think the other thing is, I think just be willing to listen. It's as many interactions as I've had over the years when it comes to nuclear power. And, I have to interact with the other side that dislikes nuclear power all the time. Try to keep it professional, try to listen to them. I mean, they have a point, especially I think the biggest challenge in this kind of industry is I always say that there's a lot of fear over facts, which when I say it that way, it means like there's a lot of emotion, and it's really hard to even just fact your way out of emotion. If someone has a gut reaction, I can give you a sheet that gives you every reason why what you're feeling is wrong. It's still probably not going to change how you're feeling. So just listening and being empathetic on that side and kind of be willing to have that dialogue open without kind of dismissing anyone, I think is the best thing you can do.
See, Pat, I told you. Therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
Therapist, nuclear energy therapist, and resurrector. You have, the expertise and experience to resurrect power plants that were once shut down. This has been such an informative conversation. I really do appreciate your time. I mean, you've shared quite a few nuggets. I love the nugget about it's a waste if you waste it, so don't waste it.
Absolutely.
I loved because you don't really hear it expressed in this way. Fear over facts is usually like facts over fear. Yeah. That way of combating fear, especially if it's rooted in untruths or non-factual information. But I loved how you use that. You kind of flipped it around to express to our listeners some of the things that you face in communities where, there's not necessarily a large amount of education around how safe it is, why it's important, and the many innovative steps that have been taken along the way from various companies and organizations within this community. So again, thank you for your time. And I want to say to our listeners, the future of nuclear energy isn't built only in laboratories and licensing reviews, as we've heard through our interview with Pat today. It's built in townhomes and community meetings and honest conversations, between neighbors. Pat emphasized the importance of being transparent, but then also owning that there are certain things that you cannot share just for safety reasons, right? So educating yourself about, the various systems throughout the nuclear fuel cycle and power plant operation, just so you can create that comfort and knowing that these things are truly safe and beneficial for all of mankind. Listeners, I want to thank you for being here. We're now on Instagram. You can find us at Advanced Nuclear Podcast. I'd like for you to give us a follow if you would. And if you're watching on YouTube, I invite you to hit the like button, share it with a friend or a family member, and also subscribe. It will help more than you think. If you want to learn more about UCAN Power, visit ucanpower.org. I am Dominique Cooper, and I will see you next time on Advanced Nuclear.
Follow Energy Without Limits. Building education for energy. B activates communities, educates the next generation, and makes energy careers visible, real, and worth chasing. Learn more at bcamp.org.